May be seated. I did make the mistake one day of not saying that, and the church stood through my whole sermon. Good morning, church. Pope Francis recently told a group of priests in the Vatican, after 8 minutes, the homily disappears. The homily in the Catholic language is sermon or witness. In other words, don't talk too long. And in his next little lesson, he said, listen instead of speak. Most of you speak too much. So I better get going. I've been ordained 58 years this year, 39 and a half years in parish ministry. And I guess I've told everybody here that this will be my last public witness. I'll continue to write and so forth, but standing and speaking are becoming more and more difficult. And I was not thrilled about the text when I looked at it, and I shared this with the Bible study that you've all missed on Monday at 2 o'clock. And I will remind you of that a couple times this morning. I have many questions, and in fact, it's hard for me somewhat to believe the story. But not the message. And so today I'm going to be working through some of that with you, and hopefully we'll give you another way of looking at this beautiful story in our text today. One way to talk about this is about the eternal moving into your life. There's a very famous spiritual archaeologist that I'll speak about later that talks about the eternal rather than using the word God. But first I want to share with you a poem that Tom read to us at that Monday group that you've missed. And it's very beautiful, and I thought I wanted you to hear it. Thank you, Tom. Mary, Nazareth's Girl by Anne Weems. Mary, Nazareth Girl. What did you know about eternal things, the messages from God? What did you know of men when you found yourself with child? What did you know of babies, you barely out of childhood yourself, God's chosen girl? What did you know of God that brought you to the stable? Blessed among women. Could it be that you had been already waiting, listening for the footsteps of an angel? Could it be there are messages for us if we have the faith to listen? Thank you, Tom. The cultural context is something that we often miss out on. Mary was at the age of marriage. That's very shocking to many of us, but in that culture, I guess 15, 16 to 20 was really the age of marrying, and people often didn't live past 40, so this was a full life. And I have to believe that Joseph was just not an old growly old man in the village, you know what I mean? You've all seen the movie, what's that? About the Russian village, the marrying person. No, Joseph, I believe Joseph and Mary were partners, were friends. Yes, I assume that Mary was a virgin, but Joseph maybe was her first lover. I began to look at this differently. We know that in almost all the religions of the world, and cultural stories, and indigenous stories, are virgin births. It just seems to be the way that the very special people get started. Buddha supposedly came out of the side of his mother, not out of the womb. That's a little bit different, isn't it? Huh? But we do know that Buddha was a man. There are historical facts about that. But I begin to look at this as the poem said, and as our prayers have said today. There's a message for you and I in this story. The eternal breaking into our lives is something that we maybe need to talk about. Breaking into our lives, does it mean only or doing the unbelievable? I don't think so. I am suggested that what happened to Mary had a visitation is also something that happens to you and me. Not every day, not all the time, sometimes only once in a lifetime. Mary was with child, and then this event happened that radically changed their lives, and the eternal broke into their lives. Charles Campbell is the famous spiritual anthropologist, and he doesn't want to use the word God, but when asked about the virgin birth, he pointed to the interviewer and said, the virgin birth is you and me. We're made in the image of God. It was kind of shocking. I had to play that one twice. But when the eternal breaks into our lives, things change. I guess I often talk about this as an aha moment. Have any of you ever had that? Now, I'm not talking about meeting the person you love and having a good pizza or the Packers winning or whatever. That's another kind of aha. This is an aha that stands you up straight or pushes you down. That really, in some ways, sometimes comes as a judgment, but it's not. It's grace. In our present world, we've got some really rough times coming. And I don't think I'm just feeling bad about what's happening. But hasn't that always been the case? In some way? How do we respond to these rough times? Oh, I suppose we could give up. That to me would be the most easiest thing to do. Hit the drugs, hit the booze, hit whatever, huh? Or just go to bed. No, and then we can ask God to fix it. You think he'll fix it? She'll fix it, huh? Is that the way it goes? I don't have to worry about it. Everything will be okay. Good luck. Good luck. We are blessed by grace that calls us to a non-judgmental, no name-calling, hope-filled life. Now, I kind of like calling names. How about you? Because I got a name for every one of my enemies, so maybe two names. But we are called to this non-judgmental, no name-calling, hope-filled life. And I want to share with you something I heard in a rather uncomfortable room in the basement of an old Swedish hospital on the west side of Chicago in January 1967. And the man who brought this message to us, and to me particularly, was a really interesting gentleman. You remember that ad, ho, 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 on the Green Giant? He was the guy that was the ho, ho, ho. But he was giving a lecture on Christ, and he read this bit from Tillich. We cannot transform our lives unless we allow them to be transformed by a stroke of grace. It happens or it does not happen. And certainly it does not happen if we try to force it upon ourselves, just as shall not happen as long as we think in our self-complacency that we have no need for it. Have you ever met anybody that was saved on July 4th, 1940? That's what he's talking about. Mary could could not say she was carrying the Son of God by herself, could she? Wouldn't that have been something? I mean, I wonder how many other Marys did that. You know, this was very special. Grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of meaningless and empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we have violated another life and a life which we loved or from which we were estranged. It strikes us when we our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, our lack of direction, our composure have become intolerable for us. I don't know if any of you have experienced any of this. I have. It strikes us year after year. The longed for perfection of life does not appear. When the old compulsions reign within us as have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage. It happens to us when we feel like everything is going great. Who needs it? We say to ourselves. It happens when the world is going to, to hell in a basket. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, "You are accepted. You are accepted by that which is greater than you in a name which you do not know." You do not ask for the name now. Perhaps you find it later. You do not try to do anything in that moment. Perhaps later you'll do much. You do not seek for anything. Do not perform anything. Do not intend anything. Darn it. Simply accept the fact that you're accepted. If that happens to us, we experience grace. After such an experience, we may not be any better than before. I like that. That's okay for me. And we may not believe more than before. But everything is transformed. In that moment, grace conquers sin, and reconciliation bridges the gulf of estrangement. And nothing is demanded of this experience, no religious or moral or intellectual presupposition, nothing but acceptance. This is where it started for me. I can still feel that cold air in that basement on the west side of Chicago, in an old Swedish hospital. Mary and Joe were accepted. And we know the rest of the stories in the Gospels. You and I are accepted, just the way we are. No hairdo, no new hairdo, no dress up, no need to use any special language or tags. You just are accepted, just as you are. I want you to think about that aha moment in your life. Maybe it wasn't one of acceptance. Maybe it was one of refusal that changed your life. Maybe you lost a job that you really loved, but then got a better job. Maybe you lost a relationship that broke your heart, and now you found a better relationship for you, for another person. This is life. And next week, we're going to be looking at Mary's revolutionary prayer. And I want to ask you, maybe this is kind of our homework, and if you want to come on Monday at 2 o'clock, you can bring your homework. Pastor will be back this week, so. what is our prayer for this time? And by the way, if we're going to pray about the next few weeks and months in our country or years in our lives, that means we're going to do something about it. We're not going to worry about Washington, we'll worry about right here in our lives together. And so I give you one Christmas message today. We are accepted. And now our only task is to accept this love.